Hi, my name's Keith Cooper of Northlight Images, and this is a Canon PRO-300. Why have I got an old Canon PRO-300 in front of me? Well, Canon are sending me a PRO-310 to do a test and a review of. Very little difference between the 310 and the 300, but there are some differences, and I thought it would be worthwhile firing up this one to be able to make some profiles at the same time, so I can look at really whether there are noticeable differences between, say, inks. There's a different ink set. Now, there are differences in page sizes and a few other things like that, but the thing most people seem interested in, and why I want to have a look at the 310, is purely connected with the inks and how it prints. There shouldn't be any significant differences otherwise, certainly not paper handling or any of the usual bits and pieces there. But this particular printer has not been fired up for about 10 months. And I will admit that because I didn't have a specific use for it, I deliberately didn't use it. Now, I switched it on, and it goes through a whole load of things. It does the ink agitation, where it shakes the ink about, and then it does a few other bits and pieces and comes back. And I knew that at least 3 of the inks were pretty low, and it's one of the reasons I hadn't fired it up for a while. And indeed, when I ran a nozzle check, it showed the grey ink was missing, and after this tried to do a few more things, it got locked up in a cycle, just doing sort of whirring noises, and eventually flagged up an error, said switch it off. So switch it off, switch it on again, and now what were 3 low inks, one of them, the grey ink, is now showing as completely empty. Fair enough, you expect things like this. But all the other ones, all the other inks, printed absolutely fine on the nozzle check. So I looked at this. I've got a spare set of inks specifically for testing here, and one of the things about the 300 is if you replace a low ink, then in the process of it loading up and firing up and starting up with the new ink in it, it will use some other inks, and if you've got other low inks, they may well flag as empty again. You replace one of those, it goes through the cycle thing. It is much better to replace all 3 very low, well, 1 empty and 2 very low inks. And I have, in terms, I've weighed these and tested them, there is very little ink left in them, so it's not too bad. But it is one of the issues you get with the 300, is that if it's running low, it's best to wait until one runs out and then perhaps replace other inks as well, because that will make a bit of a difference on it. But anyway, I've set it up. It is running perfectly well, and apart from the ink change, which I was expecting, the printer is absolutely perfectly well after that big long gap of doing nothing. The Canon printers like this are very robust. I wouldn't have left it if I didn't suspect it would be absolutely fine. Normally I suggest giving printers an exercise in the way of a nozzle check at least every few weeks. For the Canon PRO-300 and likely the 200 as well, I would probably set that, if I were actively using one, I would probably set that reminder to about 3 weeks. So there we have the 300. Perfectly working. I can make some profiles. I'm going to be profiling some papers on the 310, and I'm going to profile them also on the 300 here. In particular, some matte art papers, because the matte black is one of the inks that has changed slightly. Other things I don't think you're going to notice much of a difference. But to address one other question, the other day I did a video saying what's the best printer to get into if you're if you're looking to get into printing a little bit more seriously and something, and I said Epson ET8500, and you'll notice it's not here because it has finally gone back up to Karen's office. It's Karen's office printer, and several people said yes, but what about this and the PRO-200? Both are absolutely superb printers. I've got detailed reviews of them. I've got lots of coverage of those. My only issue with them is the relatively small size of the ink carts. Now, this is a pigment ink printer, and in many ways, if you want pigment inks, then don't bother with the 8550. It has a mixed dye and pigment set. If you want pigment inks, this is probably the 13-inch printer that you're likely to go to. You might consider the Epson P700. Look at that, that has bigger ink cartridges, but in terms of paper handling, in terms of solidity, robustness, and the thing is quite a bit heavier than other printers. In terms of robustness, this, and for dye inks, the 200. Now, if you're out and out print quality and you're looking for stuff on dye inks, pure dye inks, the range of dye inks, gamut and things like that, then the 200 is really good because unfortunately neither Canon nor Epson make bigger dye-based ink printers. So 200 for that. But if you're looking for pigment inks, this one here takes 10 inks in it. I think it's yes, 10 inks. Remember which is how many are in one. And yeah, it's really good. The reason, and yeah, I do mention this regularly, but the reason I suggested the 8550 is purely because it's an ink tank printer, and I know that a lot of people, when they get into printing, they want to experiment. Now, paper costs are not are something you should consider as well, but I know that a lot of people have a bit of a fear of the cost of ink, and yeah, that's it. If Canon produced an ink tank version of this printer here, their ink tank printers only go up to A4. I'm a Mac user and they have effectively colour management is broken on their small printers. Certainly isn't on this one. Works fine. That's why I'm going to do the profiling. But yeah, if Canon actually produced an ink tank printer that handled this size, even if it was just a dye-based one, just a dye-based one, it would be great because, as I say, the paper handling in this is rock solid. Now, some people have noticed on the 8550, if you put thick media through it, some printers, not all, certainly the one that Karen's got doesn't do it, marks papers, leaves slight marks on the papers, which obviously not something you want. Photo papers, thinner art papers, usually no problem. I printed cards on it. I've printed loads of cards on this. Incidentally, if you're curious about more information on this, have a look at the written review I did for this printer. The video review for this one was actually the very first YouTube video I produced. And as such makes me cringe these days. It's also nearly 4.5 years old. Videos can't be updated. The written reviews can. I say I've got lots of stuff on this printer if you're curious about it. If you were offered one of these on the cheap, nothing wrong with it. I would say consider the availability of inks, because these at a certain point, these inks are going to be less easily obtainable. I imagine 6, 7, 8 years you should have no problem getting inks for these, but different inks on the 310. So I'll come back when I've got the 310. I'm hoping it's a brand new uninitialized one, because the first thing I'll do is, after getting it out of the box, I'll do a new setup one. All my old videos, all my Pro-300 videos, which are perfectly relevant for the 310, they were made in sort of 2020, and they were some of my very first efforts at doing videos down in the kitchen. So sound is not necessarily as good as it is, lighting, etc, etc, etc. Yeah, it's come a long way in 5 years or so, but no, yeah, 4.5 years or whatever. But anyway, this is it. This is working, even after being left unused for quite a while. Yeah, I think that's a good advert for the printer. I say, people say, just because I did this is the best printer to get, there were a lot of caveats with that. There are many instances where this would be the best printer. Likewise for the 200 or the P700, P9, the bigger printers. So this one, no huge amounts of ink used in cleaning. This is not like the Pro-1100, which will slurp up ink every so often and do lots and lots of cleanings. This one is much more frugal with its ink, which is just as well, because there's only 14.4 mil of ink, I think, in each of these. Can't remember, it does say on this somewhere how much ink there is per cartridge, but it isn't a lot. So bear that in mind, but there are some uses for this which I would still pick this one over the 8550. So there you have it. Hope that's of interest. Come back and check the stuff. Hopefully on Friday I've got a new printer turning up, and well, I hope it's a new one so I can do that. But I will be doing testing of the 310 for black and white for colour, and doing some comparisons with this. So don't expect huge differences. Anyone who suggests huge differences has been reading too much Canon marketing materials. You don't get such big differences in printers. Anyway, thanks for that, and bye. Oh, don't forget, if you've got any questions, please do just ask. Bye.